My game doesn't have any holes. It doesn't even have any dents. My whole goal in life is to make mad money, but not make any sense. This is Mark Belbin, SuperTraining.tv, Super Training Gym, the strongest gym in the West, answering more questions today for the Power Project, brought to you by BSN, The Slingshot, and the only strength magazine in the world, thepowermagazine.com. Let's get right to this question, as I've had it several times, and the question itself has popped up. It's reared its ugly head several times in the last few days, actually. And the question is why am I good at repetitions in a deadlift? Now let's examine, to find out what we need to find out, let's examine some of the other lifts. Let's just talk about a bench press here for a second. So let's say your max bench press, the best bench press you've ever done in your life, is 330 pounds or 335 pounds, something like that. And let's say you're going to go for 315 pounds. The most you've ever done 315 pounds for is, let's just say 2 reps, hypothetically, okay? Now, a bench press is so much different than a deadlift in the sense that if you do rep number 1 and rep number 2 in a bench press with 315 pounds, and you barely lock out rep number 2, you are more than likely going to throw the weight back in the rack. Because you know that unless you're doing assisted work, where your training partner is assisting you through the repetition, that you're not going to be able to get that next repetition on your own. And let's just take that spotter out of the way, and let's just pretend you don't even have one. So you do rep number 1 cleanly, you do rep number 2, and it'd be a squeaker, it'd be a real grinder. And then a light bulb would pop off in your head, and you'd say, you know what? I'm not going to be able to save myself. I'm not going to be able to get myself out from underneath this freaking weight. I better just put it back in the rack. And so that's what you normally do, right? Now, in the case of a deadlift, where there is no eccentric portion to a deadlift, unless you're doing repetitions, this is where the repetitions on the deadlift can sometimes become confusing, because people are like unsure, should I do repetitions in the deadlift? West Side Barbell, kind of a big proponent of doing singles, but a lot of huge deadlifters, guys that are pulling up over 900 pounds, are a lot of times in their training doing multiple repetitions. And we will get to a little trick by Benedict Magnuson in just a minute. But the point is what's happening here is on rep number 1 of a deadlift, you're breaking inertia, you're breaking the ground, you're starting some momentum. You got some momentum going. There's probably a slight breakdown in form. Your hips probably shoot up a little bit. Your back probably rounds a little bit. Now, stay with me here. When you go down for rep number 2, you're able to counterbalance. You're able to use that weight as a counterbalance to keep your body in a better position for rep number 2. Also, if we had a way of measuring it, I don't know how we would, but if we had a way of measuring it, I would guess that rep number 2 and rep number 3 are probably shorter ranges of motion than the first rep. Even with the lighter weights. As you go with heavier weights, it gets even worse, because then the barbell starts to bend. And some people bounce the weights off the floor, but let's never talk about bouncing the weights off the floor. Don't ever bounce the weights off the floor, unless you go to a competition where they allow you to. CrossFitters out there, you know who you are. Don't ever bounce the weights off the floor in training. Make your training harder than the contest itself. Make your fight tougher than the real fight that's going to happen. And when you get to that event and they say, hey, go ahead and do it whatever way you want, then it's going to be a treat for you, and you're going to be able to kick everybody else's ass because you were lifting with stricter form the entire time. So what's happening on these second and third reps, your body's in a slightly better position. The range of motion has been shortened just a little bit. So having said some of that, what do we do about this? Is this a problem? Like if I if I can do a deadlift with the guy's example that sent me a question, well, I even have another example. I have a friend who's done 495 for 3, but yet he couldn't pull 510 for 1. That's a pretty severe case. But in this guy's example, I think he pulled 315 for like 3 or 4 reps, maybe even all the way up to 5 reps, but his best deadlift is 365. So how do we build strength? How do we build that power off the floor? There's many, many different ways of doing it, building that strength, building that power off the floor. Training without a belt would be one way. Working on your squats a little bit more would be another way. Working on a raw squat, working on low box squats, working on box squats, period. Because box squats have a stopping and starting point a little bit similar to a deadlift. Pause squats would be good. Those kind of movements are going to teach you to engage your legs a little bit more. And it's just going to make your lower back, your abs, make everything stronger. Speaking of abs and lower back, make sure you're staying up on that. I hope that we don't have to always go over that here at the Power Project, but like things like your lats, you got bent over rows, you got pull-ups, chin-ups, lat pull-downs, any sort of rowing type of motion is going to be extremely beneficial. One-arm dumbbell rows and so on. All those things are going to be crucial in improving your deadlift and even improving your strength and speed and power off the floor. But in the development of trying to build a little bit more explosiveness off the floor, this is actually a problem that I've had for a while now, but it's getting a little bit better. And what I've noticed is that by stopping and resetting and getting tight and going again, that is what's helping me the most. So reset every time. You don't have to completely stop. You don't have to completely walk away from the bar, but you can. If you want, you can step back for about 10 seconds or so and go again. Another thing to keep in mind here is to bring the weights down under control. Again, it's training. Why not? In training, we're always after a stimulus. We're always trying to achieve the greatest stimulus possible in the shortest amount of time. We're trying to get in there and get the hell out. We're trying to grab as much as we possibly can and get the hell out of there. You ever have any buddies in the military and they say that when they walk by, they're able to get like one scoop of whatever the hell it is, and they get one scoop of the next thing and one scoop of the next thing? It's all determined by how much of a scoop that you're able to get out, but you only have a certain amount of time to get that scoop. And you're trying to do the same thing you're training. You're trying to scoop up as much as you possibly can, as quickly as you can, and you're trying to consume that and absorb that as quickly as possible. And so in doing that, let's always try to search for a greater stimulus. And even further, if you just want to kind of, just go all out and not search for that stimulus on exercise number 1, just make sure you're getting it on exercise number 2 and exercise number. Like if you just want to go for an all-out max, you say, screw it. I just want to do it. I just want to do it my way. That's fine. But when you're doing your stiff leg deadlifts and things like that, make sure you're adhering to that principle of trying to create as much stimulation without creating too much annihilation as possible. And so basically these repetitions, these people that are good at repetitions, this is false lifting. I kind of refer to it as false repetitions. It's like almost really not happening. It's a farce, if you will. Because really what we're after, especially as powerlifters, we're after trying to lift the most amount of weight off the floor that we can. We're trying to deadlift the most amount of weight that we can through a full range of motion. And in doing so, we got to make sure that we have every aspect of our strength up to par. Benedict Magnuson, 1,015 deadlift. If you've never seen it before, make sure you look it up. The guy's a savage. He had a deadlift technique that was quite interesting. And what he actually does or doesn't do, I'm not 100% sure. This is just what I've heard through the grapevine. But basically, he realized this problem of repetitions. He realized if he could do something for 1, he could probably do it for 2, and maybe even possibly do it for 3. He's also a long-armed individual, and that plays into it a little bit too. Because that means you can do rep number 2 and rep number 3 with a slightly rounded back, and it's going to make the second and third reps even a little easier for you than someone with shorter arms. Make their lockouts are still going to be pretty smooth at that point. And in realizing this, he decided to do deadlifts out of a rack. So he would pick the weight up out of the rack. People would they would slide the posts out of the way in the rack, and then he would bring the weight downward, and then he would do several repetitions that way. You guys understand what I'm saying? You following me? They're called bottoms-up deadlift, I believe. Top-down deadlifts. They're called top-down deadlifts. There's somebody with a squeaky voice on the interwebs showing you how to do them. Why does that always happen? Anyway, so that's the exercise that he did, because he realized that he was able to take like 881 pounds and bust it out for 5 repetitions and not really get the stimulus that he was looking for. So instead, he would unrack the weight. He would start the deadlift out with an eccentric phase, and then so from there, basically what he was trying to do is overloading. So two options on this repetition, or 3 options on this repetition method. One is to always stop and do a dead stop pull. 2 is to always, or not always, 2 is to do a bottoms up or top down deadlift. I don't know why I can't get that right. A top down deadlift. And then the third option would be, do I have a third option? To do it off of a deficit. You do your repetitions, do them off deficit, but make sure that you're never, ever actually bouncing the weights. Make sure you're staying tight and staying so tight that you're ready for rep number 2, but that you're not bouncing the weights off the floor. You can touch and go. Touch and go is fine. Touch and go is okay, but my suggestion, if you're going to do touch and go, is to either do a top-down deadlift or do a deficit deadlift. Strength is never a weakness, and that is it from supertraining.tv.